Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Making Building Information Digital, which focuses on the impact of Grenfell on the provision of building information, from design and planning to construction and maintenance, the building information requirements of today across the stages of the asset lifecycle, and how this impacts tenants. This webinar preempts the launch of our new white paper, which is going to be launched this week, Building Safety in the Digital Age and how technology is enhancing building information today, and looks into how we can work together as an industry to overcome some of the complexity and challenges that we're seeing around regulatory compliance in terms of the Building Safety Act, and how we can build better and safer buildings. I'm Maria Hudson, Group CMO at the Build Data Group, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm joined by Paulius Vanauskas, who is Head of the Createmaster Sales, and Emily Hobson-Hill, Group CTO and CEO of the Build Data Group. All of us will join a discussion and share details around what we're hearing and seeing from customers, what we're hearing and seeing from tenants, and we'll also be looking at how we can support the building information delivery and management across the life cycle of an asset, and also share some demos of what can be done. Thanks, Emily and Paul, for joining the session today, and thanks to all of you that have joined as participants. If you have any questions throughout the session, then please do share them on the chat or Q&A message board, and we will either take them throughout the session or at the end. We are also recording today's session as well. So before delving into what we're really covering today, I just wanted to kind of cover off the key focus areas. First of all, we'll tell you a little bit about who we are before sharing some of the results from a piece of research conducted quite recently with non-UK freeholders on their perceptions of building safety and information and how they receive communications. We'll then talk a bit more about the regulatory framework that's in place post-Grenfell and what it means from everyone from developers, contractors, asset owners, and also tenants, before we look at more of the options for managing building information to create a safety case and a better building outcomes. So for those of you that don't know the Build Data Group, we are a collection of complementary companies that provide best-in-class software and solutions across the REBA stages of the building lifecycle. And primarily we support our customers through digital transformation. Together, our brands have a combined expertise of around 20 plus years and bring complementary solutions across areas including quality management, digital handover, and consultancy around information management and modelling. For those of you that know Zootech, that is our SaaS platform and common data environment, which delivers us solutions, as I said, across quality management, regulatory compliance, such as Building Safety Act and Part L. While Zootech is our platform, we actually sell our solutions in a modulated way, which helps kind of build out what you take from us. And provides a single source of truth across document management, decision-making, and things like inspections and auditing. Createmaster, who Paul will probably talk a little bit more about later on, and some of you will be very familiar with, is one of the UK leaders in digital handover and structured data. We have a professional and experienced team that work together towards bringing building manuals and documentation and putting that in place for contractors at the handover stage of a building for asset owners for project completion. And last but not least, we have Bryan Digital, who provides structured data and building information and management and modelling solutions to our customers, providing information requirements. As a group, we develop and add capabilities all the time to our product portfolio so that we're always adding value in terms of what we can bring to the construction industry, primarily the residential sector, to help embrace technology and also manage information and compliance around regulations. So in terms of our approach, we like to build relationships and partnerships with our customers who are the focal point of many of the decisions we make related to delivering products, solutions, and services and experience. We take a customer-centric approach to everything we do and always put our customers first. We also have a customer success team in the business, sit at the heart of our business really, and are dedicated to making sure that our key stakeholders get solutions that really work for them. We've never really wanted to spread ourselves too thinly as a business, so very much focused on the residential sector, so house builders, developers, asset owners, build-to-rent companies and contractors building in that space, and very much provide solutions that support with things like regulatory compliance and driving efficiencies. You can see here some of the companies we work with today to support in areas of digital handover, building digitization and gateway free compliance. And these companies have very much been instrumental in helping us develop solutions that work alongside your working practices, but overcome pain points as well. And some of the things that we're seeing, particularly around the Building Safety Act and building information provision. So before we get into the crux of the session, I wanted to spend a little time and dig a little bit deeper into a piece of research that we conducted in 2021 and again in 2023 to understand residents' perceptions around building safety and maintenance, and information and communication they receive. The survey took a sample of 2,000 UK non-freehold tenants over an 18-month period, living in high-rise buildings, to assess whether their impressions had really changed around building safety, particularly post-Grenfell Tower, the Grenfell Fire, and also to understand if things were changing and improving. Given that the Grenfell disaster was 4 years before our first survey, what we found was actually quite interesting, and we wanted to share some of that insight and results, and also provide a layer of transparency in terms of that perception. So what we found was that only 4 out of 10 tenants really felt completely safe in their own homes, meaning most of those surveyed do not feel 100% safe in their homes today. Well, the question could be asked, does anyone really ever feel 100% safe? What it did demonstrate is that, residents still perceive that there are safety issues out there. This figure actually remained consistent with no change over that 18-month period between the two polls, despite there kind of being mounted pressure on the industry around building information provision, safety, and what could be done post the Hackett review and associated incoming building regulations such as the Building Safety Act. So, while that is, while safety is still an issue, I think there is still more as an industry that we can be doing to probably change that perception across residents in the UK. However, what was really encouraging to see is that access to fire and safety information and communications from asset owners, property managers, has actually significantly improved over the period, which the survey also showed as well. If we compare both sets of data from 2018 to 2023, 40% actually stated that they have access to or have seen building certificates, with 22% more respondents in 2023 saying the communication from their asset owner or property manager was actually excellent. So that's really good to see that the information that residents are receiving is being received, and that residents are seeing an uplift or an improvement in the communications they get as well. Furthermore to that, 44% now indicate that they have access to fire safety certificates, representing an 11% increase from 18 months ago as well, which shows progress is being made in terms of what the industry is delivering. But obviously, as I said before, more needs to be done, and we really want to get to a point where 100% of residents, have seen fire safety certificates or communications and are engaged with what was being delivered to them. Additionally, and this is a very strong figure, 90% of residents have said that they know who is responsible for safety in their building or home, which is pretty impressive, showing that there is an engaged residential community out there, and they know who to go to if they have any issues or challenges around fire and safety. And I think, that really states that kind of only 1 in 10 really was unaware of that person. So it's clear that, asset owners and facilities management companies have really kind of responded to new and upcoming regulations, and are passing that information and knowledge on. There is probably a slight gap there in terms of that information knowledge going to tenants. But again, this is only residential perception. And also we're acutely aware that, residents need to be engaged as well to make sure that they are understanding that information and make the effort to actually see it as well. Moving on to kind of more of the maintenance side of things. When it comes to maintenance, this is still perceived as really an issue from those that we surveyed. And we have seen a lot about this in the media as well over kind of recent months and years. Nearly half of the people that we surveyed, which were UK non-freeholders, reported or stated an unaddressed maintenance issue. That's 3 times the amount of residents saying that they had issues on 18 months ago. And 2/3 of those do not feel like their issues are promptly responded to. Again, maintenance can be down to residents as well. We fully understand that. But obviously slow responses to maintenance issue can lead to safety issues too. So while there has probably been a focus on more of a focus on remediating buildings over the last probably year, 6 months in terms of cladding, maybe other maintenance issues have been sidelined. And I think, again, as an industry, it's, an area of improvement and probably gaps where there's gaps that need to be filled. So that was kind of really rounding up some of the key points from the research and gave us kind of some insight into, how tenants are, perceiving not just the information they receive, but kind of those maintenance and perception issues. So really looking back at, where this all stemmed from, and going back probably further or past the kind of Grenfell fire disaster, there's probably been a situation in the UK for many years where we have had aging building stock, and while a lot of work is being done to kind of renovate and maintain that building stock, with any buildings that have been around a long time, they may not always meet compliance and regulatory requirements. Obviously, Grenfell really kick-started that much needed attention required around building safety, particularly in high-risk residential buildings. And what it actually did was, put an emphasis from the government on kind of looking at what was required to try and fix some of these issues. And obviously, the Hackett report made recommendations for the building safety with the Building Safety Act, putting an emphasis really on information and digitization to ensure greater transparency and accountability across the industry, but also ensure information is right and readily available to those that need to have access to it, including the new building safety regulator, accountable persons, local fire services, and of course, tenants and residents. What the Hackett report did was acknowledge the failures at the time of what was happening, and really put an emphasis on building a safety regime, or putting a safety regime in place with new roles and responsibilities for managing fire and structural safety, but also looking at how we can create a safer built environment in the UK with information and accessibility to that information, so core decisions could be made at the right time. The new building safety regime will now have a building safety regulator in place under the Health and Safety Executive, who will be there to enforce safety across the Act and ensure that, Buildings that are today occupied have been registered and key information has been submitted. They will also be enforcing and ensuring that a safety case is put in place for every building in the UK, with those deadlines due to be submitted first and foremost at the end of this month for key building information and registration, but then the building safety case in April next year for in-use buildings. It has also given very clear instructions on roles and responsibilities, or guidelines on roles and responsibilities for each building, with a responsible person in place for each building that is there really to kind of mitigate risk for residents, and also a principal accountable person who is responsible for submitting that key building information, that building safety case. Additionally, the regime has seen gateways put in place with information requirements from the planning and application stage through to when buildings start work and buildings are complete, with gateway 2 and 3 really having a stop-go decision points in terms of whether those developments continue and if they can be or buildings can be occupied, based on whether information is provided and the right information is provided. And the BCR obviously have a role in making sure that that is put in place, certificates are issued, and have that oversight from design through to construction and the building being occupied, and making sure that the right information has been submitted at the right time. With information and any evidence of building work done, this is now kind of a key part of the process, and the regime recommends a golden thread of information and requirements of a building safety case, which is a very detailed report of all the safety case information that needs to be submitted as from April for every building. I know probably, Emily, from your side of things, I guess a lot of these reforms and the regime have probably spurred on some of the reasons that we've developed some of the solutions at the Build Data Group that we've looked at. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, what you've seen and heard and why we've kind of developed some of the things we have done around this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with our existing customers that I've been working with, I would say initially the prevailing kind of attitude was a little bit of panic about what would be required of them and how to take what in a lot of cases is physical paper information, how to digitize it, how to work out what they've got, how to even fill gaps for existing buildings, how to make sure they don't get into this situation with current builds. All of that kind of snowballed to a certain extent. So certainly we got a lot of immediate contact from people saying, can you help? And I think the good news is, because the Zootech platform already works with customers to manage documents, to manage workflows, to manage analytics on those documents, we were able to put together a solution that I'll be demoing just a little bit later, that does help customers get all of their information into a digital platform and do a gap analysis, help them plan to fill those gaps, and help them also tailor that to their particular builds as well, because not every building's the same. You won't necessarily have the same mandatory documentation for each one. So all of those things, immediately customers started talking to us about. But I think the key thing that a lot of people realized is the scale of the task. And even if they're just looking at particularly high risk buildings right now, should they also be looking ahead to applying this to their whole building portfolio and all of their builds? Because is that going to come soon anyway? So yeah, it's definitely been a busy time from that point of view.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. So against the backdrop of the Building Safety Act, and in light of this building safety reform and what's being done by everybody across the industry to meet compliance, but also improve the safety of the buildings across the UK, there is a mandate for change and technological adoption within the built environment, and that has kind of really had an emphasis and a strong presence, as Emily just discussed, and we've seen with kind of government guidelines as well. Under the higher risk residential building regulation, which is a subset of the Building Safety Act, it will now be an offence to allow residents to occupy any building or unregistered building, high risk rise building, after the 30th September. And new buildings are completed after the 1st of October 23 must be registered before residents can occupy them as well. At the same time, principal accountable persons must provide high-level information, or that killed building information, to the building safety regulator. And developers must apply before putting kind of stakes in the ground for building control from the building safety regulator to get approval on commencing work on any high-rise building post October the 1st. As mentioned previously, when April comes around, there is going to be a requirement for a safety case for all high-rise buildings. And again, the building safety regulator will start to assess that building information and assess safety cases and issue building assessment certificates, which is a requirement related to registered buildings and building control, which will also be enforceable. So every building will be required to have these certificates. And what we will actually see is once, with all this regulation is in place, there's we are seeing particularly a kind of build up at the moment of, trying to bring that information together, trying to, understand that information, understand gaps, understand compliancy. And, there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of clarity in the market about really what is required. And I think we're hearing and seeing, that all of this is very much open to interpretation, as the guidelines from the government have been fairly loose at this point. So, what we're seeing is probably quite fragmented approach to this. And this is why, as an industry, we really want to bring everyone together to try and look at the best practice and ways to kind of manage this building information going forwards. So it's probably fair to say, though, that we're not the first, industry to experience such reform. Unfortunately, the construction sector is the last in a long line of sectors that have suffered major catastrophic events in the past, which have resulted in kind of fatalities, and then had to have a regulation regime brought into place. And Grenfell, unfortunately, was that disaster that happened in construction. But what it has done is resulted in a move from a prescriptive to a goal-based approach to risk management, and also enforcing building safety and building safety information, and providing that building safety case. But as mentioned previously, this is about working together as an industry to look at that best practice for managing information and mitigating risk and improving safety. And we're already really seeing a lot of improvements across the residential sector, which provides an opportunity for us to learn from each other as we go forward. And that's really what we want to do. We're seeing record amounts of maintenance and repairs, and spend towards maintenance and repairs. We are seeing the kind of cladding remediation process and the remediation taking place a lot faster now, particularly since the government contract that was put in place earlier this year across 49 of the developers. The English Housing Survey has also said the proportion of non-decent private homes has also fallen. So there is improvements being made there. And actually, we're seeing as well more competency around technology for managing information and making better decisions. So there is, a huge amount of change happening, a huge amount of improvements. There can always be more that can be done. And as we said, this is about bringing the industry together to really kind of make that changes, learn from each other, and, put best practice in place to meet compliance, but also improve the safety and outcomes of the built environment that we live in. So before we move on to the next section, and Paul and Emily pick up in terms of what we're hearing and seeing from customers, and looking at some of the solutions that we can put in place, we have our first poll, which would be great if everyone could answer. It's always good to hear, the experience you're seeing and the steps you're making. So the first poll today is, do you feel your organisation is making positive steps to improve the safety and standards of high-risk residential buildings? And that's yes, no, I don't know, or we could be doing more. So it'd be great to see some of the answers and some of the responses to that. So just quickly looking at some of the incoming responses, most of you are saying yes, that you are making positive improvements. But I think there's also acknowledgement that, you know, there should be more that can be done. And I think from our conversations, and that's right, Paul, you know, we are making steps in the right direction, but you're very much hearing, particularly when speaking to customers, that more can be done, and, you know, how they take those next steps and making progress around some of these areas. So if I hand over to you can kind of cover off some of the things that you've been hearing.
Thanks, Maria. So my team has been speaking to a lot of senior technical, design management, compliance, quality assurance, digital construction, and fire safety roles out there in the industry lately, especially in the last 3 months or so, just coming up to that deadline of October 23. And what we are hearing from existing clients and potential customers alike is 3 key themes, really. One is lack of clarity on a defined structure or a template for complying with the Building Safety Act, right? So the legislation itself is very unprescriptive in terms of what records exactly do you need as an asset owner or as a contractor to satisfy it. So there's quite a bit of interpretation at the moment on what it needs to look like. And we've got consultants and these people that I mentioned in senior roles going through the legislation, going through their internal information management protocols, and trying to define what is it that I need to deliver exactly and how am I going to achieve it. So putting a defined mechanism in place, and we're helping them with that. Visibility is a big issue. It's number 2 that I'd like to raise. So being able to track what you have or haven't got during the construction phase, or even for legacy completed assets, right? How do you manage risk if you're not aware of what records are already available and what you haven't got, for example? So that's a big one, especially for asset owners. And their legal compliance teams and quality assurance teams. And the third key challenge is fragmentation. So multiple systems are currently used to deliver key building information, right? You've got main contractors with their common data environment. We've got asset owners with their own document management systems. We've got Field View for quality assurance. We have Boris for fire stopping records. We've got SharePoint. We've got emails. We've got other document management solutions. Some of the clients we speak to, there's maybe 4 to 6 different systems in place on a particular job. So naturally, there is a question of how do you achieve a comprehensive record of key building information in that scenario, right? How do you bring it into a single instance in a platform to support a handover to the end client in the first case, then support the asset owner in building a comprehensive building safety case, authoring that document so they can submit it to the building safety regulator, and then enabling the customer essentially to manage that data set in one source of truth rather than multiple fragmented platforms at the same time. So that's the sort of overview on things we're hearing out there in the industry at the moment.
I don't know if Emily, if you're hearing anything else as well from your perspective.
No, I mean, I think what Paulia said kind of covers the main pain points that people are coming to us with. I think the thing they start getting to after these initial pain points is more about adoption, comfortableness with technology, upskilling, all those kind of things that happen whenever you introduce a kind of new process, new system. So more general kind of change management problems, but ones that potentially people in our industry haven't faced at such a scale before, I would say.
Great, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Paul. So we do have our second poll coming up, and having heard some of those challenges, probably from Emily and Paul and what we're hearing, kind of wanting to understand, for those that are participating today, what are your greatest challenges are in terms of the new regulatory framework and the regime. So you can tick all that apply as part of this poll. I think the poll should be live now. And those challenges that we've identified and pulled out are digitizing in-use building stock, identifying information gaps, tracking document compliance, maintaining a golden thread of information, organising existing information for submission, preparing gateway documentation, and preparing building safety case information. Or if there's anything else that you see as a challenge, please tick other. I think in terms of the poll, we're seeing ourselves. I think there's quite an even spread at the moment across all the different challenges. So that's, it's good to see that it's probably not just one area that's a problem, that we're all experiencing probably some of similar challenges with this new framework in place. So thank you to those that have added their insight. I will now hand back to you, Paul, to take the lead on the next steps of the regime and checklist. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. So it's become quite clear that a defined mechanism is required for satisfying the changing legislation. It's a compelling event that's pushing everyone to digitize at a faster pace and rate than maybe was anticipated before this became such a big issue. But really what we're looking at is a structure and definition led by asset owners that is then filtered through to contractors, right? So digitizing building information has become a key priority, especially in the high-risk resi sector, right? So if the right information needs to be identified in the first instance, as Emily and Maria mentioned, right, to understand what is and isn't available for a particular building in terms of data that has been issued or is being issued if the project is in construction phase and live, to track that compliance element, which then essentially is the key component of enabling the registration, submitting the key building information, and producing that safety case report. And if you start with a defined structure and a mechanism in place to achieve it, chances are you will have an easier time to maintain that information post-completion, which is what we mean by that, maintaining a golden thread, right? One source of truth for all the necessary records, perhaps even allowing you to add additional information into that building data set from the operational side of that building being live. And like I said, it's important the main contractors are also involved and hands-on in this process to help satisfy those requirements, because it all starts with the employer's requirement and the contractual document that lists and defines the expectation and what you as the asset owner are looking to take ownership of at completion, right? So for contractors, it's a case of being specific, right? What do we need to provide and how is it different from what we are used to giving you, the end client? And what we're seeing with main contractors at the moment is a lot of Excel spreadsheets listing various documents and requirements to help make sense of the BSA and comply with it, or trying to build a document folder structure in their common data environment to at least try and track of what needs to be provided and where. We're seeing a need for knowledgeable technical level or design level input on these high-rise residential buildings. So a regular dock controller or project admin is no longer capable to track against this or measure this in a way that meets that requirement. So that's putting a bit of strain on resourcing internally and making sure that sufficient allocation is made to take the project through the construction phase. And then enabling them again to join those multiple fragmented systems to comply with what is actually needed for the asset owner as well as the building safety regulator. With that in mind, we believe a better way is possible, especially using the right technology to enable compliance, to enable visibility, to enable bringing information into a single instance, making it a single source of truth. And a way of doing it is to start with building digital key building information for your legacy assets as well as assets in construction at the moment, right? So what we would suggest in this particular instance where clients talk to us is sharing with you and implementing a tried and tested digital template and a structure to capture that key building information from the very get-go. From having multiple conversations with our clients and customers, from working with them to satisfy the Building Safety Act and digital building information generally, we have a very detailed, comprehensive starting point that we can sort of get implemented from the get-go, if you will. And I know for some of you on the call, we're doing it together already. Our team would help you process and categorize your digital records. Again, whether that's legacy assets that are already complete or information that is coming through the main contractors on live buildings, both are allowed for, which means you can track against gaps, you can identify missing information based on that defined structure and template that we spoke about, which enables you to manage risk, right? It's all about compliance. What you have or haven't got for a particular building or at a particular time in the live construction phase is critical for you to understand as asset owners and as contractors in instances, so you can satisfy those requirements. And at the end of this process, it's a question of how do you take ownership of the building information as an asset operator, right? How is it handed over to you? Is it in a structured, defined way, as we discussed? Is it a files and folders export from the main contractor's common data environment, or is it something else entirely, right? Is it a heavy box of paper as it used to be some time ago? So looking at enabling you to keep the information up to date, keep it standardized and structured across the board, right? So every building, every manual, every asset follows the same outline, the same structure, and the same templates. So if you can navigate one, you can navigate them all, right? Efficiency, easy user training, and easy access, I think, are key components that come into this. And again, giving you that confidence of being able to see where everything is and what you need to essentially make sure you have all that key building information in one place. We've spoken about this already, but on the Building Safety Act, Gateway 3 compliance in particular, we've done quite a bit of work in the background with some key customers of ours, and we have a pretty good mutual understanding, I would say, of what is required to satisfy Gateway 3. By no means are we saying Create, Master, and Build Data Group are 100% confident we've nailed it. I think we're about 80% confident that what we have is good, comprehensive, and a fantastic starting point for any organization looking into this. It's been well informed by some very big organizations to date. We've showed you a slide with some of the key customers at the beginning. So Peabody have contributed heavily into this process. British Land have, Greystar have, McLaren, Waits, Kier have as well. So there's quite a bit of uptake at the moment. And that remaining 20% comes back to that undefined, unprescriptive legislation, right? While we are fairly confident, we know a lot of what needs to go into this to satisfy Building Safety Act Gateway 3. There's an element of that legislation and an element of compliance that is driven by the end clients themselves to make sure that it's specific to your company, your organization, and it addresses your specific compliance needs as well. So an element of universal records that are needed, plus what you as a client might need specifically for your assets, your buildings, and your projects. Again, a defined structure and mechanism for delivery, right? A way to track against what you haven't got, and a way to keep this information live, updated, and accessible to any third party, whether that's during the construction phase or after the construction phase. So building safety regulator, fire consultants, anyone else you might need to issue this data set to. It's a simple case of just enabling, giving them access to that data set so they can see it for themselves and have confidence that you have the key building information available in one place, easy for them to use. So really it comes to a full circle, if you will. It's a 360 approach. So how to manage these documents effectively, how to deliver a standardized digital data set for your buildings, both completed buildings and ones that are currently in construction, and enable you to manage that transformation, as Emilia mentioned, right? Training your people to access this information, making it easier to find it, saving your team's time in the process and effort, right? Replicating a process and a structure so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time a project is being delivered. And then just making sure that we are listening to our clients and customers to adapt to the changing legislation, to be flexible enough to accommodate these changes, and to give you updates as and when our platforms and processes are being tailored to meet the changing legislative environment, especially when it comes to the Building Safety Act at the moment. So to summarize, our team in this instance would do most of the legwork, right? It's a service first, customer first approach. So we help you process and categorize the information, chase the supply chain on live construction projects, implement a structure to deliver against with a detailed, granular breakdown of digital records you need for your high-risk residential buildings, and then enabling you to track against that as a solution, right? So you can see where we are, what's being issued, how much of it is still needed for you to hit compliance, and then being able to take ownership of that data set and manage it yourselves post-completion to make sure it's up to date and available for the key people, both in your organization and externally as well. Over to you, Emily.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Paulius. So I'm now going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone will be able to see this. Lovely. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks good, Emily. Thank you.
Lovely. All right. So what I'm showing you now is just a kind of landing page dashboard for the kind of management of building safety documents. So starting at the high level, our solution is based on three kind of simple concepts. First of all, defining what documents are required for each building or site in your portfolio. Secondly, using those requirements to generate a list of expected documents that against ones you've already got. And then lastly, putting that information in an easily analyzable format so you know how compliant you are and where the gaps are. And one of the key things is, as Paulius said, we're 80% confident this is, this model is going to, be good for 80% of our customers. But what we need to be prepared for is more changes coming through, changes to the legislation, customers with unique requirements. So all of this has been designed in such a way that it's very easy to tweak things. So, going back to some of the comments in the chat, actually, about unique identifiers, very easy to slot in unique identifiers to this without having to do any development. It's all just configuration, such that you could then start slicing by, various things like that, or pulling out the unique identifier whenever you pull out documentation for a building. So the whole model is designed to be flexible. So essentially what this is telling me is overall status for a single building. Again, I could change it to be, estate-wide, just strategy documents. There's various ways you can slice this data. Overall, based on what we've agreed with the customer for their requirements for documents, they're expecting in the region of 2,000, and obviously this includes the full O&M handover documentation set as well. And at the moment, they're only 16.6% compliant. So let's jump into the compliance overview and go into that in a bit more detail. So this kind of breaks it down by the REBA stages, what percentage of compliance you have with documents you'd expect to get out of that REBA stage, essentially. So what this is telling me is, for example, if I'd filtered it down to just what we consider maybe REBA stage 6 under Gateway 3, you can see my compliance numbers have changed at the top. Most of my files are actually part of this stage, as expected with the handover, and I'm 20.4% compliant at the moment. So it's easy for me to drill down on that. It's also easy for me to jump in and go, okay, well, what is this document that I was expecting at this stage? And what this does is just opens up the single page view of the data associated with this document, and also the document itself if I want to review it. And I can then go and have a look. I can even do what's called reviewing it, which is where I would go, okay, I'm happy with this now. This is in final stage. And again, these review stages and the workflow, completely configurable. We can also configure it so that as documents move through stages of review, emails are sent, triggering calls to action from people. Maybe your responsible party needs to review documentation before it's marked as final and complete. That can happen automatically. We can do daily or weekly digests so they're not getting flooded with emails with your stakeholders through this as well. We can also, as I said, slice this in lots of different ways. So if I just jump into fire and life safety, it will just filter it down to, again, what is considered necessary for fire and life safety here. Now, at the moment, this particular building hasn't received any of these, but as they come in, we'll see these statuses change and you can jump through to see the documents. As I said, this is all using a requirements model agreed with the customer. So sometimes a customer might say, do you know what? You know, we're not going to get archaeological surveys or whatever that happens to be. So you've got complete flexibility to say these documents are required for all of my portfolio. These documents are required for some of the portfolio. So we can set this up at the start of day, and then your compliance percentage is always based off this, as opposed to being based off some generic list. So it's very easy to tailor it for your use case as well. I'm just going to pause there for a minute just to see if there's been any questions so far, Maria or Paul. No? Okay. So jumping back then. Other things that happen, and again, not all our customers want this, but some of the customers are interested in actually having things split down per apartment. So maybe you've got particular fire advice or drawings or electrical systems that only apply to particular domiciles within your block. That can be done as well. So we can split this down by per apartment or per block, statewide, so things that might apply to the full estate, and then overall strategy documents as well. Now, these are just ways that the customers we've been working with so far have wanted to split the information. At a base level, you're working with a sophisticated database of data attached to documents, so we can slice this data in other ways based on the customer's needs. But this has proven to be a popular way of viewing this information to start with, particularly the kind of the compliance overview, which also tells you how far through the review workflow each document is. So you can look at, you know, okay, so I need to do the final review on these ones to push them to 100%. This one actually has been returned to the person who wrote it because they need to make some corrections, and various stages like that. Again, what each stage means to you can be configurable, but for all these things, we've got an out-of-the-box recommendation if you're not sure what the workflow should be. Okay, so really this was just to give you a kind of flavour of the type of things we're doing. The other thing it's worth saying is that when you're editing documents or downloading documents, this can all be accessed from a tablet device if you wanted to as well. And documents could even be uploaded from mobile devices. Most of our customers like to work on desktop, but we've got full mobile support as well. And if you wanted to link this to kind of photographic evidence gathering, maybe you're linking it into some cladding remediation or things like that as well. Very easy to use with our field app, which then would allow people to submit forms with photos that could then be fed straight into your compliance as well. So this could all be linked up to a quality solution as well. Okay, so that was my kind of just quick demo of what we've got here. Does anyone have any questions or any comments from your point of view, Paul, about anything that resonates particularly with customers you're talking to?
I think the visibility piece is a big one for most clients. So that mechanism of putting in place a defined delivery list of records to say, here's what we need, and tagging each piece of information against a REPA stage, a particular provider, category, document type, to enable that granular view that you just showed us, that seems to be one of the key uptakes in sessions. Just the question probably is, well, how does it make clients' life easier, right? And if we can enable all of this, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's a glorified Excel sheet in the background, you could say. But making sense of it is the real challenge and the real issue here. So working together with customers to achieve that is
So one of the common views would obviously be who's a responsible party. So I could go, okay, what am I waiting for from the structural engineer, and very easily find that out. Or the other thing is to filter by status. So what am I waiting for to be reviewed? What's in draft state? Filter it down. So what it makes it very easy to do, and I think this is what a lot of systems miss, is no call to action for people. Each document can be assigned to a particular accountable party. And then that party can be sent digests of the work they're expected to do. We can very much convert this into a only show me things that are assigned to me. So it becomes a task-based view of what you need to do next. So although this is good from the higher level for people who want to get an overall view of compliance, it's also the same information you can use to have a task-based view of what do I need to do now. Similarly, with documents that potentially have expiry dates, so certificates or things that need to be refreshed, all expiry dates are pulled into this. There's already ways to store that information such that you can start having a date-based view of what's going to expire next, so you can get ahead of that information as well. But yes, thanks, Paul. Yes, that's a good point.
There have actually been a few questions that have come in, Emily, since you've been chatting. So maybe we could cover some of them off now. One of them is around the configuration, and is the configuration able to be done by the end user, or does it have to come from the back end at Build Data or Zootech?
That's a good question. The whole platform is permission based, so it's theoretically possible for us to give config editing permissions to users. What I will say is we do have customers out there who do edit the configuration themselves. They tend to be the type of customer who has an internal IT team and people who are quite comfortable with technology and could manage this themselves. What I would say 80% or more of our customers actually do is let us do the configuration. And if they want to make frequent changes, we actually offer a technical account management service. So they have a dedicated person on our side who will do that configuration for them when they need it, rather than going through the technical support desk, which is, of course, another option. But then you're using our support SLA rather than having a dedicated contact. But yeah, I mean, it's perfectly possible for a customer to do the configuration themselves. I think it does need to be a customer who has people who are comfortable with using technology every day. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Emily. And actually, another question has come in from one of our platform users, actually, around kind of lists and naming projects. So currently, the platform only lists the project names. There is no link to the actual building name and the final posted address and UPRN. Yeah. Does this allow clients to create that linkage? And maybe we could talk a bit about that UPRN kind of suggestion that came in earlier as well at this point, if you're happy to.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm showing you now is a dashboard that's just about one building, but let's say we had multiple buildings on here, then it's absolutely possible. So if we look at the information we gather per document, right, this is all within the context of, you know, the name of the project, the name of the sub-project, right? Incredibly easy for that to become unique identifier. And we've actually got a lot of unused fields expecting people to want to use these things in future. So yeah, actually using the UPRN as part of this. And I guess the other key thing is, because all this information is accessible via our API and can be pulled out, so using the UPRN, especially in communication with other systems, definitely possible, rather than using the building name or sub-project identifiers. Yeah, I'm all for unique identifiers. And I think, as I said in the chat, I think all we're waiting for is sufficient weight in the industry to back a particular scheme. And then, you know, it's very easy for our platform to support that. It's especially if the centralized database provides an API. It can even be an automatic look up and check of the information. But I think the key thing is adoption has to reach a point where, enough customers are using it that it makes sense. Because right now what happens is you end up saying, here's our ID in this system and here's your ID in this system, and we'll store down that those two map to each other. So yeah, it would make everyone's lives easier if we had a unique identifier. But I think it's a case of, we can adopt it. People need to actually do it and start using it and putting it into their data sets.
Great, thank you, Emily. And just another question that's come in is the data hosted in the UK?
It's a good question. It certainly can be. We have servers, our primary servers are in Ireland, but we do have servers in the UK as well. So if a customer needs it to be hosted in the UK, we can absolutely do that. But what we tend to recommend would be primaries in the UK with backups in Ireland, just for geographic redundancy. But if it's a legal matter, then we do have customers who have both primaries and backups hosted in the UK.
And Emily, just one from Craig that we missed. You mentioned APIs, right? Linking to the systems, and I think from Craig's side, that's probably related to main contractors' common data environments mostly. What's our policy on APIs or being able to push and pull data?
Look, our policy is that we have a REST API into all data tables that you just use your normal user authentication in order to access them. So they can be used, definitely. I would say with other systems, it really depends on how flexible the system is. We've got out-of-the-box integrations with BIM 360, with ASITE, with AssetWise. And the reason we had to do specific integrations with them is that, their interface support is not REST compatible, so we had to do something special. Any system that supports a REST API can already interface with Zootech and pull information out or push information in. But where the CDE system doesn't support that, maybe it's a little bit older, then yeah, we have done specific integrations, but it is something we need to do via the product roadmap in that case.
I think in this particular instance, it's Viewpoint, Emily.
So my understanding of Viewpoint last time I spoke to them is that there's some support there, but I don't think they can just call into a REST API and pull or push information. So I think we would have to do something specific with them, which is entirely possible. I think it just means they just have to be willing to share information in the same way that we do as well. But if they are, then absolutely happy to do that. I think I can think of a number of customers who would find that useful.
Great, thank you, Emily. I know we're nearly at the top of the hour, so I don't know if we want to cover off the last few slides in the poll, and then we can take any final questions if that's okay. I think.
Sorry, Maria, did you want me to take this?
Yes, if you could, Paul, that would be great. Thank you.
So to summarize what we went through today is technology, we can all agree is essential and critical to make compliance viable and to make it effective, essentially, right? Especially faced with system fragmentation and various degrees of competency across the industry. Some very good points Emily raised today about how are your internal resources, are they capable of managing technology solutions, or is it better to give that to someone else? I think is a very valid question to ask. Storing data in a single place so you can locate and access information easily. Again, we spoke about this multiple times, links back to system fragmentation and making that golden thread ambition near impossible if multiple systems are the preferred way to go. So again, how do we bring it all into one place? I think we tried to answer that question and show you a solution today. Using structures that are tried and tested to achieve this. Critical, very important, can be filtered down into specific contractual documents to ensure that it's not ambiguous and that it's clearly labeled and defined before the project is even live on site. So obviously cyber credentials come into the picture here, right? Data needs to be secure. individual user access needs to be secure. And again, Craig raised a good point there on where data is hosted. Again, we're flexible in that scenario. And being able to train your people and your users to manage these solutions, to keep the data live and updated, to be able to add additional records, additional documents, additional information to those data sets post-completion is something that we can help and support you with. And by all means, reach out to us if it's of interest.
Great, thank you, Paul. We now are coming up to our last poll, so it would be good for those on the call to contribute to this. And that question is, what do you need to get ready for regulatory framework deadlines? And the options are a golden thread template, digital platform, information gap analysis, managed service for building digitization, or something else. So you can select all that apply. Thank you for those that have added their data. We are now at the top of the hour, so coming to the end of the session. If there are any final questions, please do answer them on the message board or Q&A chat tool, and we can take those final questions. There's always the opportunity to ask questions after the session. We'll be happy to take anything post-session once you've had time to digest some of the information. There's a team on hand to support with any of your questions, challenges, answers around technology, implementation, direction, delivery. So please do reach out at any time. But in terms of kind of the final few questions, we do have a couple, if I'm able to ask those, Paul and Emily. In terms of kind of looking at the kind of digitization of documentation, how long does it take, do you think, to kind of fully analyze what you have to ensure that you've got the high quality information and what you need using some sort of dashboard like this and system? Take a stab. I know we're stabbing in the dark a bit, some of this.
Yeah, I mean, it very much depends on the complexity of the building. What I'd say especially with the customers we're working with big portfolios is that using our model and tooling, because obviously there's a level of automatic analysis that can be done by technology reading PDFs and Word documents and things like that. So if you're doing that kind of analysis and categorization, then what we've kind of found is you can get it down to 3 to 5 days for a whole building, assuming, right, this is when you're starting from I've just got like a USB or a drive full of documents, right? So it's not too much of an investment per building. Where it really takes longer is when you're starting from I need to scan all these documents in, first of all, or I've got 100,000 photos and I don't know what they are, which we have had with some customers as well. But yeah, I mean, if you can define your model up front and set general rules about the type of information you're looking for and the type of information you're prepared to not include, because that's important as well, because you might have a lot of emails saved off that are irrelevant now or things like that, then you can do a small number of days for a building.
Great, thank you, Emily. And one final question before we wrap up. Is there a way, and how do you validate that you have sufficient information, for example, for a building safety case? Is that something that we can support with as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got partners who work in, with this as consultants on building safety, and we certainly ask for their opinion. But I think a lot of this, until the government actually, the new regulator starts its reviews and we start to see the feedback, a lot of it, as always, is a little bit of hopeful guesswork based on, where the standards are not so prescriptive, making a good interpretation. And actually a lot of this is going to be evidentiary based, I think, as well. So as long as you can demonstrate you followed it, you had a process and you followed it, I think that's going to go a long way with the regulator as well. So the best thing to do, I think, is unfortunately to err on the side of over documenting rather than under documenting, because although you might think that you've got the key bits for a building safety case, all it will take is them asking for evidence of something that you didn't think was relevant to have to go back and start the process again of gathering that documentation. So I would say all the documentation you currently have, get it organized. And then the key gaps that we found is all around fire, everything to do with fire strategy, alarms, previous things that have happened, all that kind of side of it is where you want to go really, really detailed. Certainly what we've seen with our customers so far. But yeah, and then after that, it's the accountable person. They have to be able to be happy with the quality of that documentation, which means they need to know, when did I receive it? Have I already reviewed it? Did I ask for any feedback? And that's where the whole review process component comes in, and why it's so important for making sure that even though you have the documentation, is it actually high enough quality to be submitted if needed? Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. And thank you both, Emily and Paulius, for joining the session today and running through that with everybody. I think it was really insightful in terms of kind of where we are and the direction that we can and should be going in as an industry, and to support this building safety regime, and support tenants as well, especially around kind of understanding that safety piece. I would like to wrap the call up for today. If there is any final questions, as I said before, please do email us. You can see the email here, contact@createmaster.co.uk, and we'll be happy to take any questions and answer those offline. And thank you to those of you that participated in today's session. So I'd now like to close today's call, and thank you to everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.